Hello, and welcome to another Old Scams in Shiny New Packages podcast. On these podcasts, we use 20th century experiences and ideas to better understand 21st century scams, risk, and potential approaches. My name is John P. Raberger, and I'm here with my podcasting collaborator, Don Wood. Hello, Don.
Hello, John. How are you doing today?
Good. Today, I would like to talk about terms and conditions and privacy statements. We've all had the experience of seeing a legal document pop up and the prompt is click through if you want to use the software package. Legal disclaimers have been around for a long time. For those who lived during the 20th century, people used to get legal disclaimers as fine print in your credit card agreements, as fine print in the paperwork you used to get when buying a car or a house, or a whole bunch of other things. If you used to get an expensive item or expensive service of some kind, they would inevitably include some kind of legal disclaimer that people generally referred to as fine print. Now, let's fast forward to the 21st century and modern fine print. I'm going to be talking about two things today: privacy policies, which generally apply to organizations like corporations, and then terms and conditions or terms of service that typically apply to each software product or service that they provide. Now, we're not going to get into cookies or anything like that, and I think some people confuse those. That's going to be on a separate podcast, but the click here to accept all cookies thing is a little bit different. It's a little bit newer, and so we're not going to cover that.
And these privacy policies and the terms and conditions, these are really kind of the bane of the 21st century digital existence, because we all get them. Every time we unwrap a new product or sign up for a new app or something, there's always something there we have to contend with, read it or not. And I would imagine most people don't. But it would be good to talk about these things and how important they are. And are they important? What do they protect? Are they for you or are they for the companies? That kind of thing. So this will be a good conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you're exactly right. I think people think about them and say, wow, terms and conditions can have privacy implications. And if you ever read them, they will have some privacy and data usage things in them. And so people might think, oh, maybe these things help me. And I guess my overall opinion is that by and large, these types of things that you click through are written by the company's lawyers for the company and are designed to benefit the company. And that's the most important thing. The company,
in other words, just it's for them, not for you.
Correct. It's for them to show that they comply with the law, or to show that they give you fair warning if they decide to use information about you in a certain way. They are also written in legalese, which even if you read them, you may not understand them because the words may mean something within a legal framework that you and I, as non-lawyers, have difficulty understanding. The other thing, too, is that companies can change these things whenever they want, at least in the United States. I'm talking mostly about the United States here because that's our frame of reference. But companies can change, and they do change these things occasionally, and you'll get a message. At least I get a message, and I suspect most people get a message that says, the terms and conditions for your software has changed. Please read and update. Or a product will come out and there'll be an update to it and say, we've changed our privacy policy. Please be aware these are the changes. And so they can change them whenever they want, however they want. At least in the United States, there's no restrictions on how and when they do it.
You know what would be helpful with these companies when they do this, and they do it often, is to send us the old terms and conditions, which we originally agreed to, and then show us like the strikeout and the comments and the additions and make it easy for us to know exactly how have you changed things since I started sharing my data with you.
Yeah.
And does that term and condition apply to data I shared with you before you changed the T&C? Or is this something that's sort of a brand new thing for any data going forward? See, these questions just, they aren't answered. And I don't think they really expect us to ask these questions.
Yes, I suspect most people just click through because it's confusing or exhausting to read, or that's a very good suggestion. And last problem is it's not really clear what happens to these terms and conditions or how legally binding they are if a company or an organization goes bankrupt or is sold. For a lot of these companies, information they have about you and me and users may be a very valuable asset. So to think that the company is going to destroy that if they're trying to sell their assets off in bankruptcy, I think is a little naive, particularly if there's no federal requirement that they do so. And I don't think there is a federal requirement that they do so. So I wish they would show changes to terms and conditions. I don't have hopes for them doing that. And it's not really clear if the company goes out of business, what happens to that data either. I suspect it gets sold off like any other asset. And lastly, and there's one very well-known case, is that companies can lie about this kind of stuff. A very famous example is a affair creating company called Ashley Madison that offered to delete people's data if people would pay them. And they took the money from people and didn't delete the data, of course, because it was just easier to make money off people and to just lie to them.
And that's a dating site with a lot of compromising information, I would imagine.
Exactly. So I'm not accusing any specific company of doing this, but there's always the possibility that a given company organization is just going to lie about stuff like this and deal with the legal risk later on rather than try to comply with their own terms and conditions. And so that's sort of the complication of all this. And so bottom line, I think it's actually pretty rational just to click through this stuff. I suspect most people, when they see it, if they want the product, that new iPhone for Christmas, or if they want that cool new gaming app that all the other kids are playing, or if they want that new software feature, they're going to look at it and see the terms and conditions and say, I accept, and click through. I think that a lot of people would be well served by at least reading one of these in their life. It's going to be a grind. You probably won't understand a lot of it, but I think it's worth reading, and I think it's worth reading the privacy statements of some big corporations, Google, Apple, Amazon, things like that. Lastly is the whole legal aspect of all this. I'm not a lawyer, but I do know that a company cannot take away legal rights you have, and they cannot give you legal rights that you don't have. So if the law says you have a right to X, you can't really sign that away because that's in the law. Likewise, if a company says, well, you now have a right to Y, that may or may not be true depending on what rights you have defined in by law. And so I think maybe some people get confused about what they read regarding these and what the law says, particularly in the United States, where privacy laws are very fragmented and there's no explicit constitutional right to privacy. I think people can read rights into here that they may and not in fact have. And so I think people should be aware of that.
Terms and conditions are something that is really a kind of a novel phenomenon in contemporary life. I mean, this isn't really something that came up until about 20 years ago, I don't think. When it comes to data, when it comes to personal data, I mean, we did get contracts, and we have to sign contracts. I wonder if these terms and conditions are legally considered a contract. We're getting into the
Uh,
law here, but
yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. And you'd have to talk to a lawyer about that. They could be basically legal ass covering, saying that we told you we're going to share your data with our business partners, and that's what we did. So you can't really blame us because you clicked accept. I can remember seeing terms and conditions on software packages that I installed on a personal computer back in the 1980s. Now, there was a lot harder to share data back then, but companies did do it. So
mhm.
the whole software and services terms of conditions have been around since at least the 1980s that I'm familiar with, and probably predate that. It's just that the ones I'm familiar with were the ones we loaded on computers back in the 1980s.
And I wonder if those were little pieces of paper that were inserted in the CD box or a little screen that came up at the very beginning and you
Yeah, it
just,
was a little
yes.
screen. It was a standardized screen that says I accept, basically. Click the button, I accept. That's what they were. I remember years and years ago, open source software that is basically created and used by a community of people did not have legal terms and conditions. But over time, all that open source software is also now has legal terms and conditions associated with it also. Because probably somebody got sued over something, and so lawyers got involved and created the terms and conditions.
Have you ever read a terms and conditions and just said, "Oh, I'm not doing that"?
I have read several of them, and it's a humbling experience because being a software lawyer is a specialty within the legal world, like being a divorce lawyer or being a bankruptcy lawyer. So these terms and conditions and privacy policy statements are written by or in conjunction with software lawyers. So even if you read something and you think you know what they're saying, unless you know or an expert in the domain of software lawyers, then you may not even understand it, even if you think it's in fairly plain English. Because in the legal world, from what little I understand about the legal world, certain words have very specific legal meaning. And the software legal world is the exact same. And so I've read them, I've read a bunch of them. I don't know, maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment on this type of thing. I think there was once a long time ago that I said, no, I'm just not going to deal with it. I think that was probably in the 1990s, to be really honest with you. It was that long ago.
Interesting. That's, do you think you'd feel that way now? Or have you become so numb that you just say, ah, the hell with it and just sign off on it?
I'm so numb, just like everybody else. I just click through. I also know all the limitations. They can change these things wherever they want. I'm not going to understand the details of it. I think the legal problems associated with privacy are a way bigger issue than the terms and conditions associated with a specific software package. Because the Google can't take away any rights I already have, but I have so few rights in the United States regarding privacy that there's not much to take away in the first place. So I'm pretty numb to it like everybody else. And I think most people rationally click through it. And, it's one of those situations where most people, I think, are in fact doing the rational thing.
So, under the way you've described this, John, the terms and conditions are more or less legal liability covering for the companies, but privacy policies are something else again. The privacy policies really seem like something we should all be interested in.
They are, but again, I think they are mostly written to benefit the company to have them deal with privacy laws in the country in which they operate. Now, what would be interesting is to see if the privacy statements by a major corporation in the United States are different than in the EU or in Japan or in China and things like that. And I suspect they are. And matter of fact, I'm pretty sure they are because Google got in trouble a couple of years ago because they were okay with providing their service in China, even though in China they basically Google has to provide all the information they have on any Chinese person if the Chinese Communist Party asks them to.
Mhm.
And I think they got in hot water a couple of years ago for that very reason. But I have difficulty blaming Google because they have to comply with the laws in the country in which they operate. And they're a money making organization, and China's a huge market. So I think they're done more for legal ass covering, legal liability reduction. They may be done to show that they're a trustworthy source, but I don't think one legal document is enough to prove to me that they are a trustworthy source. And again, they can change them whenever they want. If any company wants to change their privacy statement tomorrow, they sure can, at least in the United States. There's no federal law that says they even have to have one, much less that it has to do or say anything.
And if they do change it, you're going to get an email that says, hey, we changed our privacy policies. Click here to read it. And who's going to read it? No, just move on.
Exactly. I think that's exactly true. And the question you mentioned before is that, well, does it apply to the old data or does it apply to newly collected data? I bet you they're written in such a way that it applies to everything.
Which means data that you gave them under a different circumstance. And now that data might be less protected than what you originally had signed up for. So it's kind of a shell game or a bait and switch game. That's dangerous. That sounds dangerous to me.
It is, but unless there's a law that says they can't do it, and I don't believe there's a law that says they can't do it, they're going to do it if it benefits them. And I'm not surprised by that. It may not be fair, but if they can do it legally, then I suspect many of them will do it.
I was reading now I can't remember if it was the terms and conditions or the privacy policy for ChatGPT. And I was surprised at how clear it was. Clear might not be the word. It wasn't a lot of legalese. It was pretty simply stated. One thing that struck me, though, was the privacy policy or the terms and conditions, now I don't remember which, contained the word may, M-A-Y, which seems like the biggest loophole in the history of the world, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sure
does. It's like a black hole of legalese, may.
Yeah, exactly. And I guarantee they're a big enough company that they had a whole team of lawyers read every single word in that before they posted it. And the lawyers put the word may in there for a very specific reason.
Yeah.
I know. That's why reading them, it's one of those situations where I've read them and I feel like I'm dumber at the end after reading it than I was at the beginning of it. Because I have so many questions, so many what ifs, what does that mean? What if that doesn't happen? That kind of thing. It's like I'm almost more confused at the end of reading them than I am beforehand.
So you mentioned the Ashley Madison thing, and that seems like D-Day in terms of privacy to me. I don't know all the details. I can imagine them in my head, none of them pretty. One would think that something like that would spur a kind of grassroots movement to really get under the hood of these companies and ask, what are you doing with our data and how safe is it? I mean, this seems really like something that a congressman could run on and make a lot of hay out of, because we all have to deal with this.
Well, except
and yet.
Yeah, I agree. One would think it would make a change. And by the way, I'm basing this on a Netflix special called Ashley Madison that interviewed the people who were involved in all this. And so I think it's a credible source. And there's other information that I've seen regarding Ashley Madison that seems to confirm this too. I know I would have thought, getting back to your point, that this would have been a big deal, but it wasn't that big a deal. Is that I think a bunch of people tut-tutted and said, oh, well, you're dumb enough to get on a dating site for people who want affairs, including some, quote, members, end quote, on the dating site that were obviously bots. They weren't real people. They were fake women on this dating site. And so you got hoisted by your own petard, as they used to say in the old days. And so that's on you. And it obviously didn't affect enough people deeply enough that had any kind of lasting effect, is my humble opinion.
Well, that must be right because there hasn't been an effect, and we hear about data breaches constantly, and there doesn't seem to be anything that's done about them. They're just sort of like a forest fire. It just happens. It's almost like an act of nature now when a data breach happens. We don't think of it in terms of a human being breaking in and taking jewels. We just almost think of it as a natural condition of life, these data
Yeah,
breaches.
I agree.
I know that you, in the past couple of years, have purchased some new kitchen appliances. You have a new kitchen.
Yes.
And when you did that, you purchased equipment that's all connected to Wi-Fi in very clever ways so that you can remote control various aspects of the kitchen and the house. Do you recall being confronted with privacy policies and terms and conditions before you
Yes.
were allowed to turn your oven on?
No, not to turn their oven on. The appliances that we have, the software management is in conjunction with or an add on to just regular using the oven. In other words, you can use the oven without having the software. The software just notifies you when it goes off and on and things like that. And you can also turn it off remotely. So if you drive away and say, oh no, did we leave the oven on? You can click on the software and turn it off remotely. I did not have to click on any terms and conditions when we got the appliances installed. I did have to click on terms and conditions when I used the app to connect all this stuff together. There certainly was terms and conditions for the app for these appliances, which again is not surprising at all. Now, do I think they benefit from the data they see about our appliances on this app? Yes, they do. They send a monthly usage report. So I know they collect usage data. And the data that they collect, like for the refrigerator, is pretty detailed. Like they'll tell you how many times you open and close your refrigerator.
Oh, boy, that's real useful information. Oh, I'd love to know how many times I opened it up. Do they tell you what time and what you took
Well, I'm
out?
sure it's date stamped, but I don't have that information, but I'd be willing to bet they do.
I wonder of what interest is that to them?
I'm sure it's usage. I'm sure it's in terms of manufacturing. If they can figure out how many or how many times a thing is used before it breaks, I'm sure that's very useful to them. I'm sure it's useful just for them to know that an appliance is in fact used all the time. I'm sure it's useful to them, if they send out a survey later on. And which, I mean, we all get surveys on all kinds of things now. And so I'm sure if, they want to sell add-ons, because for example, there's an air filter and there's a water filter on a refrigerator. And I'm sure it's useful to them to know that we use the water filter, 3 times a day. And so that's useful to them in terms of selling additional water filters.
And it's quite clearly pretty anodyne information. I mean, if there were a data leak and somebody found out that John opened up the refrigerator 5 times on Tuesday, November 3rd, that won't change your life in a material way.
No, it won't. And to me, I mean, I thought about this, and to me, the benefits of things like being able to turn off the oven remotely just in case, and to know when, for example, someone accidentally leaves the freezer open so the food doesn't spoil and be notified about that, I thought that was worth it.
Good
Uh,
trade-off.
and so, yeah, I'm very well aware there's trade offs. I'm very well aware there's data collection going on here, but it just doesn't bother me. The same thing is going to be happening, or depends on the make model year, is happening for your car too.
Yes, I was going to ask about that. Now, you've
Yeah.
bought a new car. In fact, you and Robin have new vehicles in the
Yes.
past couple of years.
Yes. And
Terms and
mine,
conditions? Did you have to sign a terms and
well,
conditions
we
or
both got
privacy
them.
policy?
We both got them used. I'd be shocked if the people who bought them new didn't sign terms and conditions. I mean, my car did get a software update. It is connected to Wi-Fi, and it seems to work fine after the software update. and it's a regular gasoline SUV, so it's not a Tesla or a Lamborghini or anything. But it did get a software update, and I suspect that General Motors that made my car is pulling data off there and, trying to figure out how much I'm using the car and where and stuff like that. And I think that's going to be pervasive pretty soon for almost everybody who buys a newer car.
And that seems to me to be orders of magnitude more significant than the app that tracks your refrigerator door opening. The fact that
Yeah.
data is being collected on where you're driving, how fast you're driving, where you're going, how long you're there. You could turn your phone off so that your phone isn't tracking that, but your car knows.
Yeah, yeah. I think your car knows or is going to know. And I think it would be relatively hard to turn that off. I mean, you make a good point regarding turning off your phone. You certainly can. But I think your car will know. And I think that's just the slippery slope we slid down in terms of having all these electronics and basically computers in our car now. And it's almost in every car, not just Teslas. Almost every new car now basically has one or more computers under the hood.
I haven't bought a new car in a long time, and eventually I will. And when I read the terms and conditions or the privacy policy with my car, which is silly, but when I see that and I see in black and white, your car may, of course it's going to say may, your car may record your velocity, direction of travel, and route. I think I would have a 20th century reflex action on that, thinking, man, I don't want my car to do that. But honestly, I think I would just have to sign it anyway. I really feel like we're kind of being railroaded into this thing without much choice.
Well, we always have choice because if it's attractive enough and it's well known enough, a company will provide a vehicle that does not do that. But if it's seen as attractive to collect safety information about you as a driver that may be reflected in your insurance, yeah, if everybody does it, it's going to be hard to buy a car that doesn't do it. I hate the idea of starting up your car and having to listen to an advertisement before you can proceed. That's what scares me.
Oh, that's coming. Oh, that's coming. You can't fill your car up with gas nowadays without getting a little ad on that little screen.
Yeah.
Oh, that's exactly right. That's coming.
Yeah, I know. That's what worries me is that the advertising that's going to be used over the sound system in your car for the first 5 minutes you're driving. Your car is now today being brought to you by ExxonMobil.
It's coming. Yes.
So another opportunity to click through another terms and conditions.
That's right. That's right. Well, if they would give me relevant ads, maybe it'd be okay, but they're not terribly relevant. Okay, so just so that I understand, in your world, the way you think about this, the terms and conditions are for the company. The privacy policies are kind of a general discussion of what the company is going to do with your data. Generally speaking, they can change them whenever they want, and you may or may not know about them. You're supposed to know about them. But what you do, John, you're just clicking through them. And your suggestion is that if we all just click through them, we're probably going to be okay. I'm putting you on the spot here, but is that what you think?
I personally think people should at least read one or two just to better understand what's in them. Even if you don't understand every word, I think it's useful to read one or two terms and conditions, even if you get one a day, if you just click through them. Mostly, if you just read one or two, I think that's useful. I think it's useful if you read the privacy policy statements, privacy positions by big corporations that you use, Google, Apple, Amazon. I think that's very useful. Do I think you as an individual consumer will be able to change them? No, you won't. I think most people are perfectly rational when they click through. I think I'm perfectly rational when I click through and I have more knowledge about this, because the big change is going to have to be on the legal front. It's not going to be on the product or service front, to be really honest with you.
So here's something I just read in the New York Times Magazine of last week, Sunday Magazine. I haven't read the article, but I read the headline and it bothered me. The headline is Your Brain is a Battleground, and the subhead is As Neural Implant Technology Advances, do we need a new set of rights to protect our most intimate data, our minds?
Yeah, wow, that's a whole nother podcast right there. Protecting our brains from in terms of the privacy of our brains, man, I don't know. I'd have to think about that one.
Well, it's coming. I mean, it started with the stoves, then they took the cars. Now they're going to take our brains, and we'll have to have terms and conditions each time we have a new thought.
Well, when you get a kid, you get terms and conditions.
That's,
Go to the hospital, have your kid. Here, I'm sorry, click here.
that's right. So we're headed there.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not in our lifetime. But okay, anything else?
I don't see anything else I have. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Don. And I will end this podcast by saying, don't be afraid, because modern scams are just old scams in shiny new packages. Farewell.
Bye, John.